Hey Exiles, welcome to Path of Exile 2. I've cooked up this Stormweaver Archmage cast on crit, cast on freeze comet build that I want to show you, and hopefully you could see from that beginning intro there that we have a lot of comets raining down, and I'm going to show you how to achieve that. So, first of all, what we should really talk about is getting 300 spirit, as that's the most important part. So we have a couple different ways to achieve that. If we look at gear, spirit can roll on chest piece and amulet. As you can see, I am using Everlasting Gaze, so I don't have the ability to get spirit here, and I really wanted a big energy shield chest as well, so my options for spirit became limited. What we did instead was look at getting spirit on a scepter, since scepters can roll large amounts of spirit, but then we do forego a lot of the caster mods that can boost our damage. Since we are Archmage, we do get a lot of bonuses from max mana, obviously, but looking at a scepter like this, it doesn't really give any damaging mods other than the max mana, and I'm mostly running this just for the spirit increase. So as you can see, this puts me over 200 spirit. You technically don't need over 200, and I'll get into that when we get into the gems, but I do like having this amount because it allows me to run Arctic armor as well. But you can get away with less. This scepter is actually kind of bad. I picked it up pretty cheap just when I was trying to get into this, and it's definitely like the next piece of gear that I want to upgrade. So while we're looking at the gear, I'll just go over some of the other pieces that I have. Series Disdain and Everlasting Gaze, these are obviously very powerful in tandem because conversion is taking place after modifiers to Energy Shield on the tree. When we look at Eldritch Battery, it allows us to actually still have Energy Shield after taking this node. So these items become very powerful with that. So as you can see, I have 1500 Energy Shield while running Eldritch Battery. And we'll talk a little bit more about the passive tree when we get there, but it's Series Disdain and Everlasting Gaze, both very powerful in tandem. I realize that Everlasting Gaze is expensive and is only getting more expensive. I did pick mine up when they were about 20 exalts, and it looks like they're about double that at this point in time. Onto the shield, getting something with high max block chance is ideal here. Big life, int for a lot of mana, so 24 int is 48 mana. Throughout all these pieces of gear, if you're looking for big flat mana, you can also just replace that with intelligence, as that gives you a bunch of mana. When we look at intelligence, we're going to gain 2 mana per intelligence on our gear, so technically this shield gives 48 mana as well, and then two resistances and big life. Realistically, the most important things on this shield are going to be block chance, and then some mana, life, and resistance is where you can get it. The rings, across both rings, I'm kind of doing the same thing, trying to fix stats a little bit. Flat mana is good, intelligence is good, resistance is good. Obviously, if you can get things like cold damage, lightning damage, or cast speed, those are all very helpful as well. Over onto this ring as well. So this is 9% all res, big fire, big cold, big flat mana. I think this thing was 20 exalts or so. So some of the gear is expensive. I will say that I've played this, like a version of this, with less gear, and I've just been kind of incrementally adding things to the gear. You can certainly play this without running cast on freeze as well, and so all you would do for that is just don't use a scepter. You honestly might end up having better single target damage than what I do, because you're only going to be looking at using one comet, but I get way better screen clear with having the cast on freeze setup in there as well. So it's kind of start with just cast on crit and then moved into cast on freeze as you can progressively get better gear. The gloves, these could probably be better, but big flat mana, big 2 resists, and that's what we're looking for. Obviously, more energy shield on gear is ideal. I tried to get some armor, or I was trying to get some armor, but I'm not sure that it's worth it, as we can't really get enough to find any super meaningful physical damage reduction from it. The belt here, Chaos Resistance is a massive premium, and this belt was very expensive just to get something with big mana and one big resist, and then some decent Chaos Resistance. I think this might be my most expensive piece. I think it was like 30 exalts or something. Again, prices are wild just because a couple early days, or a couple within the first couple early days of the game starting. And then finally the boots here. 25 MS, big life, big mana, and 2 big resists. So if I open up my character screen, you can see I have 30% chaos resist. I'd like that to be higher. I am actually using a chaos resist charm, as I found I wasn't getting freeze nearly as much. But if I know that I'm going into a map with, elemental weakness or extra damage as cold, then I'll usually like to throw on a thawing charm, just because there's much higher likelihood to be frozen. But there are so many enemies that do chaos damage. I feel like anytime I die, it's from chaos damage. So using the chaos charm plus getting some flat chaos resistance somewhere has helped immensely. Obviously, I'm a little bit undercapped on fire, and I hope to fix that here very soon. So that all being said, let's move on to the gem. Alright, to begin, we'll start up at the top here, and you can see that I have Malice available to me. It's important to note that every scepter comes with an implicit skill, this one being Malice. Malice is the only one that we can actually take advantage of. Some of the other ones you're going to see are like Purity of Ice or Purity of Fire. Those do nothing for us, but only affect our allies, as scepters are designed specifically for minions in mind, but it is a way for us to scale a lot of spirit. And important to note, while we're talking about it, looking at this scepter, you can actually improve the quality, which does improve the base spirit with the artificer's chisels, I believe they are. So it is a little bit easier to get a higher amount of spirit on a scepter, and that is something to keep in mind. But talking about Malice, the reason we want this as the skill is that it actually inflicts critical weakness on the enemies in our presence, rather than being a buff skill to our allies. So it is one that we can actually take advantage of, and obviously critical weakness is very advantageous for us as it allows us to crit enemies close to us more often. Not really utilizing Raise Shield is probably something I could do better with, and Purity of Fire is just coming from my offhand, so we'll skip those. I have ascended 3 times, so I do have access to Elemental Storm. I have this link to Font of Mana, Control Destruction, Ingenuity, and Considered Casting. One thing to note is we have a lot of skills that we're using here, and right now in early access, there's not a lot of skill gems that we have available to us. So some things that look like if you want to use Considered Casting on your Cast on Freeze or Cast on Crit setup, you absolutely can. You definitely want to play around with this, move these different skill gems to different skills to see what feels and works best for you. This is just kind of an outline of what I'm doing and what I've achieved, the results I've achieved with, but you can certainly change these around to best suit you. Just come into this panel here, see what is actually boosting the damage, and see what feels good. Moving on to an aura, we have Archmage here. So Archmage I have linked to Clarity support. Obviously this is a big portion of our damage. Archmage is giving us a ton of damage from the maximum mana that we're stacking. Getting quality on this is also very, very useful, as it can then go up to 7% and beyond. It looks like maybe 20 might be giving us a flat 6%, so with quality would be a total of 8% extra lightning damage, which is massive. And then on to Eye of Winter here. Eye of Winter is serving as our catalyst to proc both Cast on Crit and Cast on Freeze, so the skill gems reflect that. We're running Glaciation for more freeze buildup. We're running Inspiration to lower the mana cost. This is something that you may or may not have to use. Again, you'll just have to play around with it and see what works for you. And then finally, Inevitable Critical here. Inevitable Critical is just, again, giving us more chances to crit the enemy to proc more Casts on Crits. And then finally, once you're able to, adding Pierce is great for just hitting more targets with it. Onto Frostbomb. We're using Frostbomb solely as a means to apply cold exposure, and I have this link to Strip Away as well as Persistence. This comet here is our self-cast comet, and admittedly this is something that I use less and less anymore, but it is something that is very useful against bosses or rares. We only ever want to use this when the enemy is completely frozen, and that's to take advantage of such support such as Leverage here, which will boost the critical hit chance against immobilized enemies, and immobilized enemies does count frozen enemies, as well as using Elemental Discharge, which consumes the freeze on the enemy to do a larger bulk of damage. And then finally, we utilize Hourglass, as it's something that we're not casting all the time, so we can afford to increase the cooldown for more flat damage. The first cast on setup is Cast on Critical, and we're utilizing Comet plus Impetus, Energy Retention, and Cold Mastery. This last one is definitely more of a flex. I feel like Comet gets big benefits from having plus level to skill gems, and since we don't have a weapon that can scale that, using the support could be useful, but you might find better success with just a larger damage multiplier with something like Considered Casting or something else here. Just play around with it, see what feels best for you, but I definitely feel like these two skills are awesome because it allows us to just get more energy, retain some of that energy, and proc more cast on crits, causing more comets to fall from the sky, right? This is a Ice Nova setup. I'm not really utilizing this too much anymore, but I was using it in the beginning to kind of just freeze nearby enemies or push them back. And then onto Frostwall. So Frostwall is absolutely one of my favorite abilities in this game and definitely part of this build. So what we really like about Frostwall, and well, first I'll go over the links. So we have Frostwall linked to Deep Freeze, linked to Icicle, and Cold Pen. And what's really cool about Frostwall is if I come over here, I can show you. If I throw this down, we can actually proc our cast on crits from it. If I could ever actually crit, you'd be able to see. And we're out of charge. There we go. Okay, so the comet finally procced. So that was a bad example as I just really rolled low there. But what's nice is that we can use Frostwall kind of as pseudo mob density. So I throw it down in the middle of packs, and one, it definitely blocks, ranged attacks. It can block some spells, it seems, and the enemies do fixate on it. But we're using it to kind of amp up the targets that we're hitting at once, which can be really useful for proccing things like cast on crit. So it acts like a nice defensive layer as well as an easy means to freeze enemies, and enemies like to target it and just run over to it, so it gives you a place to kind of like focus all your comets in at once with it. So love Frostwall. On to Cast on Freeze is our next comet setup, and this one I have set up pretty much solely for screen clear and for kind of applying freeze to a bunch of stuff all over the screen. So I have Comet linked to Cast on Freeze with Spell Echo, Magnified Effect, and Spell Cascade. When this goes off, as you could probably have seen from the intro footage, you just get tons of comets, falling from the sky, and it's a lot of fun. Is it the most damage? Probably not. You could probably just make this another like single target um, comet and get more damage out of it that way. But this has been really fun for me, and you can't really undervalue the idea of freezing like an entire screen of enemies at once. So I really like it for that. And then finally, we have Arctic Armor down here, and I have Arctic Armor linked to Bludgeon and Blind. This again just being another defensive layer for when I inevitably get swarmed of enemies. You can certainly drop this. If you did drop this, you would only need 60 for cast on freeze, 100 for cast on critical, and 100 for Archmage for a total of 260. But I would certainly recommend going up to 270 for the clarity, and then that definitely relieves some of the pressure on finding a huge Spirit Scepter. Next, we'll go into the passives. All right, so this isn't really serving as a leveling guide or anything. This is going to be more so taking place once you're at the level of running cast on crit with Archmage, I would say. But what we're looking at here is, and first we'll start with the Ascendancy. Obviously, we're playing as a Stormweaver. We want to utilize Arcane Surge. This feels like the best mana stacking Ascendancy. However, there probably is room to say that something like a Monk could do this very well as well, and something that I might explore in the future. But we're playing Stormweaver. We take Arcane Surge, we take Force of Will, and then I am taking Elemental Storm. And as it stands right now, if I were to get my fourth Ascendancy, I would take Rain Dancer. However, I think Heart of the Storm is very interesting, and this could actually act as a nice defensive layer for us in endgame content. And with the way we have Elemental Storm right now, it seems like there's a lot of them down already, which is why I kind of wanted to see how crazy Rain Dancer could get. But I definitely think Heart of the Storm might end up being better for like late game. Moving on, we just path up through here, taking cold damage and the lightning damage plus shock and freeze chance. I have critical overload anointed. If you don't have this anointed, you're probably going to need to try to get some additional crit somewhere. But over here, we're going to take these. These nodes are very cheap and easy for us to access. And then we want crit and crit bonus. And we're also going to want to come over here and get Arcane Surge. This is very powerful for us since we have permanent Arcane Surge, so this gives us a lot of mana regen. And then through here, we're going to path through elemental damage to take all of this. Storm Charge is great. It gives us a lot of flat crit chance, and as well as basically permanent 40% increased elemental damage since we're always critting. And then over here, you've probably seen a lot of people utilizing this. This block wheel is incredible. It's multiplicative with what's on the shield, so something like 41% chance becomes 59% chance, which is excellent. And then yes, this top node here, giving us 1% damage back for all of that. is great. Some of the other things to touch on, as you can see up here, I've pathed a little bit into the cold tree here. The freeze buildup is excellent because it's one allowing us to proc cast on freeze more often, but also it acts as a strong defensive layer and then levels to cold skills. I do think that glaciation here is also very good and probably eventually something that I'll look at getting. Pathing up through these lightning nodes, getting pure power is excellent as well since we have a lot of flat intelligence and we're looking for flat intelligence on gear. And then over here we have controlling magic, so this is just more flat crit chance here and getting this crit dam bonus or crit multiplication or whatever it is in this game, crit spell damage bonus. These could also be very nice. This is a lot of flat energy shield, big flat intelligence, and then I don't see a lot of people running this, but we are constantly moving, and 50% increased mana regen is awesome for that. Obviously, Eldritch Battery, you might not be able to run this initially. All that really means for you if you're not running Eldritch Battery because you don't have Everlasting Gaze, for instance, all that means is that you're going to have a smaller mana pool, which means that you're not going to have as much scaling from Archmage, which is fine. Don't necessarily need all of it. The damage has not felt like an issue so far, and I'm in T7 to like T10 maps. So damage hasn't really been so much of an issue. It's survivability that's really becoming an issue. So realistically, don't worry too much about this. It's just a big damage multiplier once you finally can get it. And then over here, these mods are all excellent for us. You know, something like this, where we're recovering 3% of our mana is super great. Triggered spells doing more damage is obviously excellent since our build is relying on triggered spells. This also works for uh, Elemental Storm. As you can see, Elemental Storm is a trigger spell. And then lastly, up here, Energize is great because we're getting tons of the energy back, which means we're proccing more and more comments. That's what the tree looks like right here. These nodes right here, I'm just kind of experimenting with. As you can see, I'm not mind over matter. I don't necessarily have enough mana or mana regen to really utilize this yet. Eventually, this would be something that you would want to look into going, as well as, CI over here to basically become immune to chaos and bleed damage. But I don't have that yet, so I'm kind of looking at taking some damage from mana. That way I can kind of more effectively utilize the 2700 mana that we have for defenses. But I'm not too sure on this. We have this right here, which is 8%, and then over here there's also 10% chance, or 10% of damage taken as mana. I'm kind of playing around with that, so those points kind of can be flexed around. You can obviously take more damage right here, getting something like this, or coming over here and getting this cold pen or this lightning pen, as we do actually still do more lightning damage than cold damage. So just anywhere that you can scale spell damage, lightning damage, or cold damage on the tree is obviously going to be very, very useful. All right, that seemingly wraps everything up. Please don't hesitate to drop any kind of questions or comments you have down below. Obviously, I don't do this full time. I just wanted to throw something together that kind of showcases what I've been playing and what I've been working on because it's been a ton of fun and hopefully I can help some other people out along the way. If you like this kind of content or want to see more, please subscribe, leave a comment, or like the video. All of those things go a long way to show your support for the channel. Thanks.
Darukan favored me.